just to get a sense of the nature of the support that Israel has abroad. It comes from people who are notorious bigots, racists, anti-Semites. Why is that? Because it runs much, much deeper than a theology. Because these ideologies are based on the same general principle, which is ethno-national supremacy. It's my group, my ethno group, my religious group, my racial group, my in-group, it has to be pure. And we have to build a state for just our group and no one else. And we don't want infiltrators. We don't want anyone else in the group. We want to have, our enterprises will only hire Jews. Our government will be made up of entirely Jews. Our labor market will be entirely Jewish labor. So let me ask you this. Just replace the word Jewish with white and you're talking about the Ku Klux Klan.
Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Today we're joined by Dr. Zachary J. Foster. This conversation is going to blow your mind. Dr. Zach is an incredible historian, educated in real history, not propaganda that we're taught in school, and he knows his stuff. In this essential conversation, we dive deep into the often hidden connections between the Zionist movement and the eugenics movement, and how it is this history that has shaped Israeli immigration policy today. We uncover a shocking historical alliance between Zionism and the most notorious anti-Semites ever. And we analyze the dangerous conflation between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, which we are witnessing being used on the public as a #1 propaganda tool today. Finally, we examine the unprecedented role of the United States as co-perpetrator, detailing the billions and billions in arms and ammunitions funneled to Israel. And we also delve into the official narratives surrounding some of the most recent events. Dr. Foster is a young, articulate, educated in real history, absolutely worth listening to. Sit back and enjoy this history lesson. Everyone's talking about what's happening now, and clearly we have a lot of people in the country who still have a very, very, I don't know how you describe, their idea of how this nation came to be is just, it's a complete fabrication. Well, first of all, I've heard you called Dr. Foster, so I'm correct in saying that, right?
I do have a Ph.D., that's right, but you can just call me Zach.
Okay. So you have some credentials, is what I'm just putting out to my audience. You aren't some dude I found on Instagram who happens to be talking the same language as me. But I thought a good place to start, and I first of all, before we end, I'm going to encourage everyone to check out your online courses and your channel, and make sure they follow you, because there's a lot of very important information right there for them. And but I thought maybe a good place to start, and some place that people don't realize this connection. There's a direct connection between Zionism and the eugenics movement, right? Literally the exact same people were funding both these ideas, and both these ideas have a lot in common at the same time. And I was wondering that'd be a great place to start. Very interesting topic that most people don't realize is directly correlated to the ethnic cleansing we're witnessing.
That's exactly right. I would describe Zionism as a eugenicist movement. The earliest Zionist leaders, people like Arthur Rupin, people like Menachem Schenken, they rejected Jews who wanted to migrate to Palestine because they were weak, they were destitute, poor, sick, elderly, unhealthy. And that was the basis of Zionist immigration policy from the 1890s all the way to the 1950s. People don't realize this. I think this is probably the greatest myth about the Zionist movement, is that it was all about rescuing Jews from persecution. That's a myth. It was precisely those Jews who were fleeing persecution, who had lost their means of livelihood in pogroms, who were the first ones rejected, because the Zionist movement was all about trying to build a Jewish state in a country that was 95% non-Jewish, that was 95% Palestinian Arab. And to do that, it needed Jewish professionals, Jewish capitalists, and Jewish fighters. And it also wanted Jewish ideologues. It wanted Zionist ideologues. And so refugees, by definition, were moving to Palestine not for ideological reasons, but because they needed a safe haven. So for the very reason that they wanted to move to Palestine, they were rejected. The only Jews that the Zionist movement wanted to bring to Palestine were Jews that were motivated by ideological reasons, that believed in Zion, that believed that that this movement to take over Palestine was going to bring about redemption to the Jewish people. And if you didn't believe that, you were unwelcome in Palestine. That was the case from the 1900s, 1890s even, all the way to 1914. In fact, between, let's call it the late 19th century and 1914, the architects of this policy we mentioned, Arthur Rupin and Menachem Schenken, they rejected about 61% of people that wanted to migrate to Palestine. And they even told them why they were rejected. Schenken actually wrote letters back to these Zionist applicants who had written letters to the Jaffa Palestine office saying we wanted to migrate. Schenken wrote to them, you're too poor. And recall that these agricultural colonies set up by the Zionist movement, they were unviable. They were unsustainable. The crop yields were low in Palestine. The Zionist immigrants were unskilled. They didn't have a background or a history or any expertise really in farming. And they were also accustomed to a much higher standard of living. So all of these Zionist agricultural colonies needed to be backstopped by the Zionist movement, in particular the Rothschild families. They backstopped the first half dozen colonies in Palestine because they were economically unviable. And so the Zionist movement wanted wealthy Jews who would infuse capital into those flailing enterprises to prop them up. And that was why they insisted that Jews, only wealthy Jews, Jews with capital, were allowed to migrate to Palestine. In the 1920s, it got even worse for a few reasons. Number one, the Zionist movement was now backed by the global superpower. It was backed by the most powerful empire in the world, the British Empire, who in 1917 adopted the Balfour Declaration. And then in 1918 conquered Palestine. And then in 1920 and 1922 implemented the Balfour Declaration via the British Mandate for Palestine, which was recognized by the League of Nations at the time, and whose mandate was to facilitate Jewish immigration to Palestine and facilitate Jewish land purchases in Palestine. So now the Zionist movement had great power backing. And you have Chaim Weizmann, who's the leader of the Zionist movement, in 1919, he says, we could allow thousands of Jewish refugees to migrate to Palestine. We could, but we don't want to. And he was the leader of the movement, and he outlined the immigration policy, which was carried out by Zionist operatives on the ground in Palestine. And the policy was no refugees. In fact, you had about 1,000 Jewish refugees who had fled from Iran during World War I. There was a big famine that struck Iran during the war. They made their way to Baghdad, and you have the Zionist office in Baghdad in 1920, in 1921, in 1922. They're sending letter after letter after letter to the Zionists in Jaffa and saying, we got these 1,000 Jews, the refugees, they're impoverished. This was the whole reason why we set out to establish a movement in the first place. It was to rescue Jews exactly like these Jews in Baghdad. They had been kicked out of their temporary place of refuge in Baghdad, and they were literally living on the streets. And the Zionist movement, what did they tell the office in Baghdad? They said, no refugees. This movement isn't about helping Jews fleeing persecution. That's not what it's about. And this policy, I could give you, there's volumes of books written about this immigration policy. This isn't a secret.
No,
it's a secret
and it's
to most.
Documented. It's not theory. It's not a secret.
In fact, the policy continued after 1948. This is the mind-blowing part of it. By the way, the policy continued into the 1920s, into the 1930s, at a time when Hitler comes to power in Germany. The policy continued. The policy didn't change. They still wanted Jews to come to Palestine who had capital. In fact, they charged Jews a significant sum of money just to receive a certificate, effectively an immigration certificate. So it immediately blocked any Jew without means. That was very intentional. And then after 48, it was even worse.
Yeah.
You have the Zionist official in charge of immigration policy in Israel now. Israel declares itself a state in 48, gets recognized by the United States and the Soviet Union just minutes after it declares itself a state. So now there's no more obstacles or impediments to to allowing Jewish refugees to come to Palestine. But the policy remained the same. They had very strict health screening. So you had all these Zionist immigrants coming to Palestine. Or in fact, before they even got on a boat, they were screened by Zionist officials in Italy and France and Morocco and Tunisia and everywhere else. And the Zionist officials were told, do not let anyone board these boats who is sick, who is diseased, who has diseased children, who are bringing elderly, unhealthy relatives and old parents. And you have him, he brags. You have a Zionist document from 1949, 1950. He's bragged. We rejected 2,000 Jews from Germany. We held up 3,000 immigrants in Morocco.
Wow.
Because they were sick and diseased. This is in 1950.
And I'm wondering who makes that call, and whether that they were actually sick and diseased or just of low enough economics, social status where they just did not fit the bill, and this is a huge misconception, that this is the Holy Land was meant so we could rescue and give these people a home, a land. What was this? What was the phrase they sold the world on? A land for a people.
That's right. A land for a people without a land.
Yeah,
that was the slogan.
Complete and utter, just bullshit. It's literally a sales pitch. It's a slogan, as if 2.5 million people were not living there, and as if it hadn't been a bustling city and a very central location for 1,000 years. It's always been a very, very, I can't call it metropolitan, but it was a very bustling city, because Jerusalem was right there, and people from all over came and they were welcome. There wasn't it wasn't like it is now. Oh my God, it's democracy. But so I want to get into 1948 and above, but for people who don't understand, this is, when you're talking about 1933 to right up until really the war escalated to the degree that this was no longer even a viable option. You had Hitler striking a deal with the same Zionists who literally sold Germany out in World War I. Because he felt like he didn't have much of a choice. There was a worldwide embargo on Germany going on, and the industrial heads of this planet were like, yeah, we'll starve them out if that's what you want, sure. And so Hitler was afraid of that, and he sent his guy to meet with the Zionists, and they said, look, we make a deal with you, we'll float your economy while the embargo's going on, and send us all your Jews, especially the ones with money, because this is what we'll do. We'll use our contacts in the United States, like the Bushes, like the Dulles brothers. We'll set up different financial institutions just for this. We'll put all their money in escrow, and then only when they arrive and are registered and confirmed in Palestine will we give them back their whatever estate they put in escrow, and we'll force them to buy German goods while we float your economy the money it needs to keep going during the embargo. And Hitler was like, yeah, sure. And that was called the Haavara Agreement. Most people have caught wind of, the coin that was minted, the gold coin, had the swastika on one side, the Star of David on the other. Yeah. And that was the final transfer was the other name for it, I think, right? So you had, of course, but imagine the discussions that went on. I'm sure that Goebbels, whoever they sent, Hitler was like, yeah, oh great, that's no problem. How would you like me to convince them to go from their affluent, 35-acre estates in the mountains of Germany, wherever they lived, to an Arab third world nation in desert? You know what I mean? Like how and of course the deal was like, we want them to believe there's only one safe place for them. And if you want the money we're offering, you better make it so. And so that's how, the rounding up began. It began from a deal done with the Zionists. People think it was like Hitler's big idea. It actually wasn't his idea. So it's just like to put things in a little context. But the fact that this went on even after 1948, when really the whole world had been emotionally manipulated and put into a position to believe that, well, this is the only way it can be now. We have to, boatloads of Jews were being brought over to Palestine, and it's just not so much the case. It's not so much the reality of what was happening and how they were forming this, is it?
You're exactly right. And in fact, the anti-Semitic Zionist alliance is much, much deeper than the 1933 Haavara Agreement, which you brilliantly outlined was a plan to prop up the Nazi economy, a plan developed by the Zionists in partnership with the Nazis to prop up the Nazi economy that was being boycotted by Jews all around the world and many others all around the world, and funnel cash into the economy to prop up Nazi factories and the German manufacturing base at a time when it was struggling. And that's what the Zionists were doing. But of course, the partnership and the alliance runs very, very deep, right? Because Zionists and Nazis had the same goal, as did many other anti-Semites. They wanted to rid Europe of the Jews. That's why in 1878, Istoszi, who was the leader of the Hungarian anti-Semitic movement, he gave a speech, and he was a politician. He gave a speech before the Hungarian parliament calling for the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine. This is 2 decades before the first Zionist Congress led by Theodor Herzl. And then you had many others. You had Wilhelm Marr, who was a German journalist who, by the way, coined the term anti-Semitism and is oftentimes credited with a kind of a racial anti-Semitism that replaced the religious anti-Semitism before it, in which he too supported Zionism and was an ardent Zionist because he wanted to rid Germany of the Jews. Alfred Rosenberg is oftentimes considered one of the chief ideological architects of Nazism itself.
Wow.
He is often considered to be one of the key people who inspired Adolf Hitler himself. He was a raging Zionist. Arthur Balfour, perhaps the most famous Zionist in history, known for the infamous Balfour Declaration, calling for the establishment of a Jewish national home in a land of 90% non-Jews, Palestine, 90% Palestinian Arabs. He, in 1905, sponsored the Aliens Act to keep Jews out of Britain at a time when they were being slaughtered in the thousands in Eastern Europe, in pogroms, in Odessa and in the Pale Settlement and elsewhere. So this is the nature of the Zionist movement. It has long established partnerships with anti-Semites and racists and Nazis. And by the way, it still does today. It did so in the late 1970s and 1980s when it partnered with the anti-Semitic Argentinian junta, which was responsible for disappearing 20 to 30,000 people. And among those 20 to 30,000 people were about 12 to 13% of them were Jews, even though Jews were only 1% of the Argentinian population at the time. So they were targeted, and you have anecdotes that the Jews were singled out for especially harsh torture in those Argentinian torture dungeons. And there's a lot has been written about this. Isn't a secret. This isn't debated history. Everyone knows this to be true. And it was this state of Israel whose number one arms export partner was, wait for it, in the late 70s and early 80s, the world's most anti-Semitic country in the world, Argentina. So, I mean, you literally can't make this shit up.
No.
Israel's never been about rescuing Jews from persecution. It has never been about fighting anti-Semitism. On the contrary, if you look at who are the closest allies of the state of Israel today, let's talk about the United States. Who are Israel's closest allies? Who do you know John Hagee? John Hagee is the founder of Christians United for Israel, CUFI. And in the early 2000s, he published a book in which he said that God sent Hitler to planet Earth to murder 6 million Jews, to push them out of Europe so that they would be forced into Palestine, in which they would help bring about the rapture and the second coming of Jesus Christ, and thus the end of days. That's the most, I would say he's probably the most important non-Jewish Zionist in the United States. And he also doubles as perhaps the leading anti-Semite in the United States today. That's one example. We could give you 100 more. But just to get a sense of the nature of the support that Israel has abroad, it comes from people who are notorious bigots, racists, anti-Semites. Why is that? Because it runs much, much deeper than theology and eschatological thinking about the end of days. No, because these ideologies are based on the same general principle, which is ethno-national supremacy. It's my group, my ethno group, my religious group, my racial group, my whatever my in group. It has to be pure, and we have to build a state for just our group and no one else. And we don't want infiltrators. We don't want anyone else in the group. We want to have our enterprises will only hire Jews. Our government will be made up of entirely Jews. Our labor market will be entirely Jewish labor. So let me ask you this: just replace the word Jewish with white, and you're talking about the Ku Klux Klan.
No shit. You're literally like, I just saw, sometimes I still get things on my feed from my days as an actor and a filmmaker. And I this article came up about legally Warner Brothers is under fire because boycott for Israel may be discrimination. I was like, oh yeah? Why don't we replace the word Israel with, let's say, Saudi Arabia and see who gives a fuck and thinks that it's, like I was like, this is just the double standard is just it's obscene, it's absurd, it's insulting. Like of course you could boycott anywhere and anyone you want, and no one would say anything. But if it's Israel, of course the ADL, and they're gonna jump down your throat and try to accuse you of being anti-Semitic. That's their main weapon these days. It's despicable.
The ADL just published a report today in which it's describing quote unquote anti-Semitic incidents in New York City. And this is just an epic report. I have to pull up this if you don't mind. I just want to pull up the exact data point that they come out with. So they say that the report is on anti-Semitic incidents in New York City, and they say that there's been a 58%. They say that 58% of anti-Semitic incidents in New York City in 2024 were, and this is a direct quote, anti-Zionist incidents. So their goal is to conflate Jews with Israel.
Yeah,
they want everyone to think that a Jew is an Israeli,
right?
And the result is that people then go and attack Jews because they're angry about Israel's apartheid regime and its genocide of the Palestinians.
And that furthers their cause.
So the organization tasked with documenting anti-Jewish hate and in theory trying to prevent anti-Jewish hate is actually inciting people to hate Jews.
That's right.
They're putting Jews in danger, and I would even say they have Jewish blood on their hands.
Oh, absolutely they do. And people have not made the correlation, that this grand conflating, is all by design, and it's working. It's working incredibly. And I talk a lot of, a lot of the conversations I have on my live streams and in my podcast, are also very spiritual based. And I talk about how the power of our beliefs. And as an example, I use this little rogue nation in Israel who professes from the time that these babies are born, all they hear is that they're victims, that the whole world hates them because they're Jewish, that there is no safe place for them, right? Oh, in every way, they're bombarded with this, and they're taught to dehumanize and see the Palestinians and all Arabs, even, and depending on where you go, they're spitting at Christians too, because that's a mockery to them, and so what has happened over the past 75 years? It's all coming true. You get millions of people to believe something, and then what happens is reality bends itself to their beliefs, and we have a world now that is really on the brink of complete loathing and hatred, which is not good, because the Israelis in many ways have been used and in a way that is just unconscionable. The amount from the time World War I, it's just terrible. And now, of course, because of the indoctrination, because of the brainwashing, they're completely, most of them have no idea, and they're like rabid dogs when it comes to this. They are literally what they have been conditioned and trained to be, which is like it's on another level. The brainwashing and the indoctrination. Like these people, I don't know what they teach them, but to that, so that they sleep at night. But like the dehumanization of Palestinian people, how they do what they do, and imagine that it's okay. Like that's like, don't tell me they're not reading the Talmud. Don't tell me that many parts of Israel is not subscribing to that belief system, because I know Hasidic and I lived in New York for 20 years, or Orthodox Jews. They don't believe this. They wouldn't touch it with a 20-foot pole. It's against their religion, and people are like, oh no, the Talmud is a banned book. I'm like, yeah, bullshit. What do you think they're reading at the highest levels? This far right government up there. What do you think they believe? How are they treating people? It says it right in the Talmud, how they're treating people, how they think it's okay to treat, goyim and people who are not Jewish. And I'm not sure, you probably are even more educated about that, but people don't understand. A lot of people have never even heard of the Talmud, but it's an atrocious book, but if you read it, and you'll start to understand how someone can be indoctrinated into thinking that it's okay to murder, rape, torture, and kill another human being just because of their ethnicity.
Yeah, regardless of what you think about Zionism, one thing that is indisputable is that it is historically has nothing to do with Judaism. In fact, the vast majority of Zionists historically have been Christian. It began as a Christian phenomenon in the 16th century, or I would say the 17th century, let's say the 1640s. It was a Christian phenomenon for most of its history. It wasn't until the 1870s, let's say, that any Jews started to think about the reconstitution, the establishment of some kind of Jewish commonwealth or polity in Palestine. That was, for the vast majority of its history, a Christian idea. Judaism and Zionism are, I think, at odds with one another in so many ways. And that's why, like you said, most religious Jews, again, regardless of what any of us think about Zionism, this is just stating an objective fact. If you're a pious Jew, you're a Torah-observant Jew, Zionism is a heresy.
Yes.
Because it's telling you that the things you should be focused on in life, that you should care about in life, that you should dedicate your life's mission to, are unrelated to Judaism. Right. Judaism is a book of again, I'm just stating facts right now. Judaism is a book. Judaism is based on the Torah, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and then it's based on the Tanakh, the Torah, the Nevi'im and Ketuvim, and then it's based on the Mishnah, and then you have the Talmud, and then you have the Shulchan Aruch, and so you have all these holy books, and these books, especially, let's say, starting with the Talmud, is very, very clear. We have the 3 oaths in the Talmud, and one of the oaths is you shall not return, ascend like a wall to Israel. And this has been interpreted unambiguously over the course of a millennium and a half by the rabbis. This means you should not, en masse, as a group, return to Palestine. Jews also believe this would be part of the end of days scenario, but it was only God that could decide when that would come, not human beings. And any action taken by human beings to try to pull that future forward, to try to bring about the coming of the Messiah, of the Mashiach, that is heresy in Judaism. And that's why, if you go back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when Zionism is first coming about and is getting embraced by these secular Jews, there's almost unanimous agreement. There's like almost no exceptions. Every major halachic authority calls Zionism a heresy. There's like no exceptions. And then what happens is, after the Balfour Declaration, and after Zionism is now a reality, right? After you have now hundreds of thousands of Jews living in Palestine, you get co-optation. And you get Rav Kook, and you get these modern Orthodox Zionists, these Zionists who actually try to marry Zionism and Judaism, but that is a later development. And again, it's considered by most religious authorities well into the 1930s and 40s. It's considered a total heresy. And it's only after the establishment of the State of Israel that it's basically a fait accompli. And the religious authorities, especially the ones living in Israel and living in Palestine, they accept it as a fact. So they're collaborating with the state for the same reason religious Jews in the United States collaborate with the United States government, because they want to get benefits from the government, and they want to get tax breaks, and they want to get subsidized education, and all these other reasons. But they're not Zionists. Make no mistake about that. And
Wow.
if I could just say a few more things about kind of
Absolutely.
Zionism and Judaism in general. I mean, obviously, Jewish texts speak in many voices, but you know, the Jewish tradition begins with Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve are not Jewish, but they're the first people mentioned in the Bible. Judaism has a kind of a universalism to it, in which God creates all people in the image of God. And we have this law in Judaism. It's sort of the law that precedes all other laws, which says that you're allowed to break any Torah commandment for one of three things. Like you can, if someone says like, eat this bacon and cheese sandwich, or else I'm going to kill you, or either you eat this bacon and cheese sandwich, or die. Obviously, you would eat the sandwich,
Right?
Because life is more valuable than everything, except for three things. Killing someone else. So when someone says, either I'm going to kill you unless you kill that other person, you're actually supposed to say, okay, I refuse to commit murder. And there's two others, basically sexual transgressions like adultery. It's like have sex with your mother or else I'll kill you. You're supposed to say that I'm not willing to do that. And then the third one is pray to an idol. Is you're not supposed to sort of like outwardly, openly declare that there's multiple gods. So those are the three holiest things in Judaism. But did you hear anything about like Zionism come up in those three things? No, funny. You didn't. It has nothing to do with Judaism.
No.
Right? It's not about, there's something sacred about Zionism. In fact, it's a heresy because it's telling you in order to be a good Jew, you don't need to wrap tefillin, you don't need to pray, you don't need to save a life or pursue justice, tzedek terdolf. You don't need to do any of these things. But what you should do is move to Israel, wave an Israeli flag, pick up an assault rifle and go murder Palestinians in Gaza.
And take their land while you're at it,
And steal their olive groves. That's what Zionism is all about. Again, where does Judaism come up in there?
It's a testament to propaganda, indoctrination, and dogma, and like one of the biggest problems with these kinds of organized religions. There's I have a lot of different problems with each and every one of them. And this is just an example of how it can be taken advantage of by the most powerful people on the planet for their own means at every turn. And how, you just imagine how much they're laughing at what is happening right now, in their 57,000 acre estates, the Rothschilds and these families who, could care less about any single life on this planet other than their immediate families and their cronies, like the Rockefellers and the families that they put in business, who they own, who run the industries for them. They collect all the scratch in the end. They got more money than most of the nations on the planet, which is how they get away with anything they want. You can make a lot of things happen when you have that kind of resources. So I think the truth needs to come out about a great many things. And Israel's actions over the past 2 years are forcing the issue. They're the same way we saw in 2020 with the World Health Organization and what Gates did with that whole mess. A lot of things have come to light. People have woken up to the allopathic system and that specific industry. People are reading up on the true history of it and which is very, very shady. And so, every time they kind of do this, and David Icke always talks about this when I talk to him, he's like, they overplay their hand and people sit up and be like, oh, wait a minute, we start connecting the dots in ways we didn't before. And that's what Israel has done, and I don't know, they want this to be a forever war. And my question is, who's going to stop them? Who? There's only one nation that can stop them. And we're the ones enabling them. So we're in a pickle, and I'm like, if the Jews could declare a worldwide embargo on Germany in 1933, why can't the world declare a worldwide embargo on Israel in 2025? What are we waiting for? That's the only other thing that it would take. If the whole world stood up and said, "That's it," we're not. Everything would come to a screeching halt. Even with the laws they have in places and the power they have in governments, people would go out of their way, and then Israel would be forced to change their ways because the people living in Israel would demand it. And I don't, I don't know why that hasn't happened. I mean, I know why, because of the control of the media, and, anybody who tried to organize such a thing would be cyber attacked, and, it would not be easy. But I don't know what people are waiting for. I don't know what needs to happen. They just continue to drop bombs that we pay for as Americans every day on different, oh, cool, there's a ceasefire. Well, why are they bombing Lebanon? They're bombing not just a little bit, they're bombing the ever-living shit out of Lebanon, and no one is saying anything. It's not, the propaganda, the money that they've spent on social media over the past, just 2 weeks alone. I go through I have 160,000 followers on Facebook, and it's just a page. It's not my personal account. So I don't know how many times I blocked and hit hide, how many ads I've got over the past week and a half. It is one pro-Israel propaganda bullshit after I'm obviously they're not paying any attention to what you're putting, not interested. They're just pummeling. They must have so much money flowing into Meta, because I'm literally I block and hide 24 pages a day, and apparently the algorithms haven't quite sorted out what I want to see and what I don't. I'm just imagine the money they're spending to overcome that kind of okay, because the algorithm is supposed to adhere to your preferences,
right?
But if you throw enough shit at the wall, something's going to stick. So they just it's phenomenal, and it's all bullshit. It's propaganda.
Well, I was going to say that's fascinating, because if what you're saying is correct, that you keep telling the algorithm, I'm not interested in this content, but it keeps giving it to you.
Yeah.
But that's an indication that it doesn't have anyone else to show those ads to. There aren't enough people, let's say, that maybe fit the bill. But what I wanted to say, though, in response to your point about the United States' role in all of this, Francesca Albanese is the UN Special Rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories. And she just published a report today in which she documents the role played by the United States and European powers and many other countries around the world in the genocide. And she documents that since October 2023, the United States has sent 742 shipments of arms and ammunitions. So that's basically every single day. I mean, if you just add up the days between October 7th, 2023 and today, you come out to about that number of days. So we're talking about literally a ship departs from U.S. soil every single day.
Wow.
With billion, and over the course of the past 2 years, the United States government has approved $21 billion in arms shipments to Israel. Both Biden and Trump admin, and now I'm quoting, have, quote, reduced transparency, accelerated transfers through repeated emergency approvals, facilitated Israeli access to U.S. weapon stockpiles, held abroad, and authorized hundreds of sales just below the amount requiring congressional approval. Right, so they're playing all the games. It's not just that we're sending billions and billions. We're playing all the games to work around all the checks and balances, to prevent Congress from being able to block anything, in order to ensure Israel, and to pull stockpiles from U.S. Warehouses abroad, to just make sure it's not America first, that it's Israel first.
Right.
By September 2024, this is already a year ago, we had sent Israel 57,000 artillery shells, 36,000 rounds of cannon ammunitions, 20,000 rifles, 14,000 anti-tank missiles, almost 9,500-pound bombs. By April 2025, we had sold Israel, actually, excuse me, I said 21 billion. This, according to this report,
it's 33, right?
She says 39.2 billion.
39. Oh my God.
So you can't even keep track of it. 39 billion in weapons sales to Israel.
People don't understand how much money that is. People think that the difference between millions and billions is a letter. It's not. It's like the difference between the moon and the sun. You know what I'm saying? You could actually build a ladder from here to the moon with $39 billion. If a physical ladder in bills from here to the moon, that's how much money it is. People don't understand that amount. That's not an amount you could pick up and bring any. My God, and meanwhile, people here are not doing well. The between inflation and this, it's a fucking mess. Groceries are more expensive than ever. it's just, I don't, it's disheartening to say the least.
Yeah. And so I think when thinking about the genocide in Gaza, we have to consider the United States a co-perpetrator,
Absolutely.
a participant, because if it weren't for those bombs and those artillery shells and those cannon rounds and that munition, the genocide would have ended a long time ago. It was Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant who said in the early period of the war, he said, the war would stop in 5 days if the weapons spigot was cut off today. He said it would end in 5 days.
Yep.
And the United States also has the power to end it whenever it wants. It knows it has
That's right. And Ukraine too. Duh. Like as if Ukraine could be fighting anything without us supplying and I mean, it's the same. It's a different scale, but it's the same thing. People are like, oh, I can't end the war. Yeah, you can end the war, but you've lost control of the military industrial complex, so you can't end shit. You could talk about ending the war all day. JFK did as well, and you saw what happened to him. And these people they're experts. They have ways of assassinating people that most of the public would never even have conceived possible, And I tell people all the time, like, if you think that Israel was surprise attacked on October 7th, then you're living in come back to earth and hang out for a while. Understand the technology we have, the intelligence, the surveillance. Like, there's not a fucking conversation that happens in Israel with anybody related to Hamas or their sister's, cousin's, brother's roommate that Israel's not listening in on and knows exactly what's going on. There's no money that goes to Hamas they don't know about. There is no such thing as a surprise attack, let alone, what do the headlines read? I fell out of my chair when I saw it, Zach. I swear to God, I fell out of my chair. This chair, I couldn't believe my eyes. It said like, Hamas surprise attacks Israel, invades, and I was like, what? This has got to be satire. I thought I was reading a joke, and I was like, oh, there's no way. After 9/11, after everything we know, there's no way anyone's going to believe this.
Well, we may have to disagree on that one. Look, I think one thing people didn't really understand about Hamas is that it was for many years focused on a level of operational integrity and secrecy that I don't think anyone believed was possible. Recall that Yahya Sinwar, who was released in 2011 in the Gilad Shalit deal, had emerged as a prison leader. When he was released, he became the head of Hamas's intelligence unit. He rose through the ranks, and he was in charge of rooting out collaborators. And he was ruthless. And I mean, you see what's happening right now in Gaza, right? There's a zero tolerance policy. There had been a zero tolerance policy to collaborate. So if there was any suspicion of someone who was leaking information to Israel, they would be eliminated. And in fact, one of the reasons Hamas has been able to manage to resist the genocide for so long. I mean, think about, we're talking about 2 years in, total siege, total blockade, the most surveilled...
Total annihilation. Yeah.
The most surveilled piece of real estate on planet Earth. How did these hostages emerge alive from the tunnels after 2 years? You're telling me Israel had no idea where these people were for 2 years? I mean, that's insane, right? I mean, but you have to remember, Hamas is also able to, if you look at the videos they release, and I would highly recommend following the work of John Elmer, who over the past 2 years has produced a resistance report once a week, where he goes in depth on every Hamas military operation, talks about reconnaissance, talks about command and control, talks about spotters, talks about the video footage that they're capturing, talks about them returning to base after a successful mission without compromising the integrity of the mission. So he goes through and he basically explains to you how Hamas has managed to maintain a closed circuit. They have an internal communication network that Israel had never been able to tap into. A Hamas fighter in Rafah can communicate with a Hamas fighter in Beit Lahia from the south of the Gaza Strip to the north of the Gaza Strip without the Israelis knowing what they're saying.
How is that possible?
They built an underground, closed network that the Israelis haven't been able to penetrate. And that is how. And so they have closed communication. It's a closed line they built from scratch, underground. I mean, look at the operations they were carrying out on October 7th. I mean, you have to remember also, Israel is like, if like, I don't know if arrogance quite captures.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. I'm gonna let my dog out so she stops. Cookie. Go ahead. Go ahead. I don't know why I record with them in the room. They always end up finding something. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm very interested.
No worries. Look, Israel is, I think, you could accuse Israel of many things: genocide, apartheid. I think extreme arrogance, this belief that we are superior, both in terms of our military capabilities, our intelligence abilities, our spying capacity, right? The Mossad. Right? Israelis have this image of themselves as indefensible, right? After the 48 war that they won and the 67 war that they won and the 73 war that, let's say, maybe ended in a stalemate, but Israel would still say they won. And Israel sees itself as and so you have this extreme arrogance. And then you have the paternalism of those Israeli commanders talking down to the female soldiers who were actually the ones watching the screens and guarding the gates of Gaza. So it's the arrogance and the patriarchy and the paternalism and the belief in superiority and the assumption that Hamas is primitive. This arrogance that these people, that they have no ability, that they have no capacity, that, that they're just incompetent and they're irrelevant. That is the assumption, and Israel always had been. So I do think when we say, again, who the hell knows? We're all speculating here. But based on also my own encounters with the Israeli security apparatus, this idea that Israel has just such an incredible security apparatus is a fiction and it's a myth. It's just a myth.
Maybe.
I don't buy it. I don't buy it. It's a paper tiger at the end of the day.
I mean, I think in many ways you're right, but I still absolutely 110% believe that, the allowance of October 7th, just like the allowance of 9/11 in America, was done, in many ways simply, facilitating when you have to, orchestrating when you have to, flipping a switch when you have to, but also looking the other way, and making sure that confusion rules the day. Like, oh, well, we were running like 9/11. We were running all those rehearsals with the jets, and so normally a hijacking situation would immediately be, the fighter jets would be released. But guess what? They were all out of gas. Just coincidentally, no one could get there. And October 7th, we know that we've had IDF soldiers come out and say we were given a stand down order from the hours of 5 to 10. Just so happens that's when Hamas invaded, and the Iron Dome was not functional. They don't really have a clear explanation, but I can tell you, like, in my opinion, Bibi Netanyahu needed a Pearl Harbor. He needed mass casualties, and the Samson Directive, we know for a fact, was a green lit thing, and the Israelis were killing Israelis. Like, part of the body count came from the Samson. They were like no hostages. So it just, to me, it all adds up to, I think it's very, very it was a false flag in many ways.
Well, you're certainly correct about the Hannibal Directive, in which on October 7th, the Israeli government and the Israeli military, not in one or two locations, but I believe at least 6 locations, perhaps more. So we're talking in Kibbutz Be'eri, at the site of the Nova Music Festival, and the road that was adjacent to it, and multiple other locations, I believe Re'im as well. The Israeli army issued it was effectively a mass Hannibal Directive, in which Israeli soldiers were ordered to, basically the Hannibal Directive is a directive that was developed by the Israeli military in the late 80s that says it's better that our soldiers get killed than get captured. That's the directive, right? Because you don't want to allow Hamas to take captives, which would require you to release however many Palestinian prisoners.
Right.
And so, in order to prevent that from happening, you just kill the soldier, and then you don't have to worry about releasing any Palestinian prisoners. And so that order was issued not once or twice, but like I said, at least 6 separate locations on October 7th, 2023. And you have respectable, extremely respectable authorities, people like John Mearsheimer, who was a professor of politics at Chicago. I would say perhaps the most renowned expert on international relations, living today. And he said, and this is a direct quote, he said, "I believe a majority of the Israeli civilians killed on October 7th were killed by Israel, not by Palestinian factions." That's not, and we're talking about 800 some odd, I forget the exact number, I mean, a little bit less, but a little bit less than 800 Israeli civilians were killed on that day. John Mearsheimer is saying about 400 of them were killed by Israel, perhaps more. And I think he's right. And I think he's right
too.
Because if you look at the photos, for example, from the Nova Musafa, so you have these, I mean, I'm sure everyone's seen the photos of all these cars piled up. How do you get hundreds of cars that are just completely decimated? I mean, Hamas entered Israel with like AK-47s.
Right. Exactly, like RPGs
on motorbikes. But how did you tell me you have 300 cars all piled in, like, literally they look like they were exploded, but that's because they were. Yeah. That's because you had Apache helicopters firing Hellfire missiles on them.
Right.
And you had Israeli tanks firing shells into Israeli communities in Be'eri. And so, and there were multiple other incidents documented.
Yes.
We know that Israel killed a huge number of people on October 7th. And they did that. I mean, and again, they did that because kind of, if we can just sort of circle back to where we started, right? With this idea of, is Israel all about saving and rescuing Jews, right? Well, you'd think killing Jews is like the opposite of rescuing Jews. But that was the order that was given on October 7th. Kill as many Jews who may get kidnapped as possible. That was the order. And then on October 10th, there's an article in Ynet in which Hamas called on Israel. They said, we will exchange all the captives, all 240 captives. All you got to do is promise you won't invade the Gaza Strip. All you got to do is promise you won't carry out a genocide. Just don't be genocidal, and you get everyone back. That was too much for Israel.
No,
there was too much.
It would defeat
they
the whole
were too hungry and thirsty for Palestinian blood. They wanted revenge. They declared there would be a second Nakba, even though they deny there's a Nakba.
They deny the first one.
They deny there's a Nakba, but they're saying they're going to do a second Nakba. You know, Isaac Herzog, there's no such thing as an innocent person in Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu twice said, likening Palestinians to Amalek, the people, the biblical Israelites, were commanded to annihilate every woman, every man, every child, every goat, every ox. You had the statements of almost every single important Israeli leader from October 7th, and they continue to the present day, where Smotrich and Ben Gvir talk about flattening Gaza, expelling every last Palestinian. And these people aren't extreme. They represent the Israeli mainstream.
I know.
A poll in January 2025, so already almost a year ago, 47% of Israelis agreed with the statement that when the IDF captures or conquers a territory, it should kill every single person in that territory. That's kind of the definition of genocide, is killing everybody. I mean, actually, genocide requires a lot less than that. That's like a 100% successful genocide is 47% of Israeli Jews support that. 82% of Israeli Jews believe that all Palestinians should be expelled from the Gaza Strip. About 62% of Israeli Jews support expelling Palestinian citizens of Israel. This is their own citizens.
It's a democracy, though. It's a democracy.
Can you imagine? 62% of white Americans believing that, like, all like Muslim citizens of the United States should be expelled? I mean, that's Israel. That's Israel for you.
It's like the level of gaslighting and the arrogance and just the ability to just say anything that they want, regardless of how far from the truth it in reality is. Like it's almost like their plan is like to be as opposite, like as arrogantly opposite, like when he stands there and says, "We are the most moral army in the world," knowing that like they're slaughtering women and children, like that takes a level of I don't know what that I don't know if we've ever seen on the world stage before. I mean, we saw, our people go with pictures they were given of weapons in Iraq, but we don't know if Colin Powell knew they were horseshit or not. We knew that Tony Blair was the one feeding Bush, but we know Bush was going to Iraq no matter what. That's what 9/11 was in large part about Iraq. Afghanistan, sure, we got poppy fields there. We can launder a couple $1 trillion over the course of 20 years, but Iraq is really what the main interest was and why 9/11 went down, because we wanted the oil and we wanted to destabilize that. And Bibi said it was a good idea. He said it would have great peaceful reverberations in the Middle East. Yeah, to like 1 million Iraqis dead later, there's no such thing in any of it. And my God, man, he's a snake in the grass, that guy. Do you think that he's ever going to be held accountable for what because he's already been found guilty, right?
Well, he's been indicted.
He's been indicted.
The ICC has issued an arrest warrant
Yes, I
for
know that.
both Benjamin Netanyahu as well as Yoav Gallant. They also issued arrest warrants for the 3 Palestinian leaders of Hamas, all of whom have been killed by Israel since October 7th. So those arrest warrants are not really relevant anymore. But the ones issued for Netanyahu and Gallant are still obviously very relevant.
Right.
And it's both not just the United States, but France and Greece and many other European countries have completely ignored those arrest warrants.
Yep.
Netanyahu has flied over French airspace. He's flied over Greek airspace, Italian airspace, I believe also British airspace. And they don't arrest him because they're also all those countries are also complicit in the genocide.
Yeah.
The United Kingdom has been flying spy planes over Gaza.
Of course.
They play the leading role. Actually, they fly more intelligence gathering missions through the RFF REF over Gaza than anyone else, including Israel.
That's how they're making their change. We sell the hardware, they're doing the spying. Everyone's making a buck. Which is why it won't stop.
That's exactly right. Germany is Israel's the second most important arms supplier, supplying something like 20 to 30% of the arms to Israel.
Yeah.
Spain, France, Italy, Greece, all of these countries have military partnerships with Israel. Actually, the Greek Air Force is effectively run by the state of Israel, and that's why Greece has become so subservient to Israel. That's actually one of Israel's long-term strategic initiatives, is to implant its own military systems via Elbit systems, via Israeli military companies. They try to create partnerships with militaries around the world, embed their own military systems in other military systems, such that those other militaries become dependent on Israel.
Yep.
Such that they are
and they're doing a bang up job. They're doing a great job. And they learned a lot from the United States. So much to the fact that it's like now they're like a stepchild who we just keep having to bail out of jail and fight their fights for them. And but we're responsible because we raised them wrong, and so we just keep doing it. And it's just at some point there needs to be a reckoning, and I'm not sure who the hell is, because I know that you can't tell me or convince me that Trump is not scared of Israel.
He's very scared.
He has every reason to be. So anybody who is going to take a stand, a true stand. Now Trump's ego may be big, but he's also got people around him surrounded that they're Zionists through and through. His money. I mean, we saw what happens to someone who is funded by the Jewish lobby, who then begins to speak against it. Hello, Charlie Kirk. May he rest in peace. I was never a Charlie Kirk fan, but to me, it's freaking belligerently obvious at this point what likely transpired with Charlie Kirk and why there's such a shit show around it. And it certainly didn't have anything to do with James Tyler Robinson, whatever the fuck his name is, that poor bastard. There's a reason why they won't let him utter a word on a microphone or in any kind. I mean, they won't even let anyone see him. That guy is just like, his father sold him down the river, man. I just feel terrible for that crazy dude. It's like, just because he had a trans lover, I would just wonder what kind of rationale it took for them to get the father to go along with this. And, it was his family that then was hired to pave over that part of the, where the murder scene took place. They redid it. They paved it over. It was his family they hired to do it. I mean, like, you can't get any more on the nose. Like, it's like a bad Scooby-Doo episode, It's fucking crazy.
Well, we may disagree about October 7th conspiracy theories, but we probably do agree on Charlie Kirk conspiracy theories because, I mean, it just doesn't add up. I'm sorry. And this is coming from someone who, like you already saw earlier on in this program, I'm not prone to these types of arguments, but it just doesn't add up. The evidence is almost so overwhelming What appears to me to be the conspiracy theory is the official narrative. I'm like,
absolutely.
The only thing I'm 100% certain of is the FBI narrative. The Tyler Robinson narrative is obviously false. That's the only thing I know for sure. So then the question is, where am I looking? What other evidence is there?
Right.
Okay, so you're telling me he turned down his biggest donors in the weeks leading up to his assassination started pulling his funding because behind closed doors, and we saw the Cadence Owens text message threads,
Yes.
and we know about Max Blumenthal's reporting.
We know about the intervention.
We know about the Bill Ackman intervention. We know he was drifting away. And it wasn't just some random influencer, some random conservative influencer drifting away. We're talking about the leader of the most important movement among young conservatives in the United States today.
And look what has happened since his demise. And that again is, it's just so, you can always tell why something happens by what then, the subsequent actions that precede the event, and look who's running Turning Point. I'm willing to guarantee you that Turning Point has renegotiated that proposal that Charlie Kirk turned down. And he literally belligerently, he said flat out, he's like, they're so stereotypically bullies. He was like, I just at this point, I cannot be pro-Israel anymore. Like, he literally said that, he was dead within 2 weeks. Like, and then as soon as I could not believe when his wife did the press conference. I was like, this is like, I don't watch reality TV, man. I can't stand it. I don't watch politician speeches. I may read about or see clips of them on social media so I can get a laugh, but I hate reality TV. It's terrible. And like, what was going, like, how does anyone 48 hours after seeing what we were shown, which, by the way, why did social media allow, this, what is it, carte blanche, no censorship for today? If I post a video of a child who's bleeding under the rubble, I get my video taken down. But Charlie Kirk can be shot in the freaking neck and bleed out, and there's the videos are circulating by the tens of millions. No censorship, no flag, no warning. Like, clearly this was orchestrated on every level. And then we just had the Google report come out to show all the James, what's his name? James Tyler Robinson, is that his name? All the Google searches that happened the day before in Washington, D.C. and Israel. Like, why would all of a sudden just came out like all this huge uptick in searches for the name of the patsy? Probably because people wanted to know how the fuck they were going to try to get away with this when they caught wind of it, But coincidentally, in Washington, D.C. and Israel, you had the most uptick in James Tyler Robinson searches the day before the assassination.
Really? You're kidding me?
No, I literally just...
That's insane. Oh, my God.
Right here. It's fucking crazy.
Every piece of new information that gets revealed about this Charlie Kirk assassination is, as far as I can tell, what I've seen so far, every new piece of information released adds even more doubt to the official narrative and adds even more support to other theories. And if you're saying there's Google search history, 24, you saw the tweet from Josh, what's his name? Josh Howell?
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Wait, which tweet was it?
The Cadence Owens, when she released that text message thread, where Charlie Kirk basically says, I'm out, I'm done with this pro-Israel shit. And Joshua... He belongs to TPUSA, I believe. He's involved. What's his last name? Howie? Joshua Howie? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his...
Maybe,
his
yeah.
Anyways, so he basically tweets out, and he was on that text message thread where for 48 hours before he was assassinated, there's this text message thread in which Charlie Kirk says, I'm done with the pro-Israel group. Joshua is on that text message thread. 24 hours before Kirk was assassinated, this Joshua character... digs up a 2013 Donald Trump tweet in which he publicly endorses public assassinations.
Wow! I didn't see that.
And he retweets it out, and he says something like, in some message of support of publicly assassinating people. 24 hours before Kirk was killed, 48 hours after the thread where he's like, I'm done with Israel.
Come on.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but
You don't
If
have
that's,
to be though. Like
but
listen,
that's just, yeah.
I've done extensive videos, and research, I should say, for the videos about the JFK assassination, about Timothy McVeigh, about the lone gunman, the lone bomber. It's always, if that's the story, it's complete and utter bullshit. And you don't have to even be a conspiracy theorist to look at the level of coordination that has gone on with the Charlie Kirk cover up and see that, this is the literal definition of a conspiracy. You know what I mean? Like, look up the definition of conspiracy. This is what you're seeing. You're seeing all kinds of people coordinate to cover up what has happened, and literally in real time when you see that assassination. And I didn't really like Charlie Kirk before I didn't really know him. He was just another face. I know he was controversial. I found out afterwards, but I saw the way he tried to answer people who posed questions to him, and I think that he had good intentions, and I think he had a decent heart. I didn't see him I didn't see any of the stuff that people said that made him racist, but I'm sure a lot of it was out of context. He seemed to be a good dude after all. Not that I was ever a fan, but I do think he was naive in imagining that he could he had the level of autonomy to be able to just say what he wanted and be protected. I think he was naive. But listen, I found that video. This is what it says. So I'm going to play it for you, and then I'll have my editor kind of just play it for the.
Sure. Breaking news in Charlie Kirk's assassination. We now have Google Trends showing that people in Washington, D.C. were searching up Tyler James Robinson and Lance Twiggs on Google before the assassination ever happened. The red right here shows Lance Twiggs. The blue is showing Tyler James Robinson. This is searches that are happening
That's
in
insane.
Washington, D.C.
If
Where
that's
the
true, that's
government is
insane.
at, obviously. This says that the government is searching them up for some reason. Why? Why are they so curious in these two individuals? We also have proof that Israel was searching up Tyler Robinson. Right there is a little uptick in Tyler James Robinson searches on Google in Israel well before Charlie Kirk was ever assassinated. The big uptick you see is afterwards because people were, I guess, trying to make sure it got done, right?
It's like
Insane.
And so here you have, and then of course Google went back and then deleted it. I'm sure they got in trouble, but it's like they live by the same sword that they're going to end up getting sliced by, and this is one of those cases. Like, too late, man. People were smart enough to look, and of course they made that. It's just gone now. It's just gone, because Google is really good at rewriting and prioritizing things they want people to see. But my God,
Crazy.
it is crazy, man. Listen, you are a wealth of knowledge, and it's just refreshing to have a conversation with someone who is so well educated in so many facets of this particular subject, which is, it's still going on, man. And I was thrilled when I saw your IG channel, and I checked it out, and I was like, I'm having Zach on. I want to talk to this man, and I want to help him get a bigger following, because we need to we need to educate people. We need to get people to understand what has really gone on, because I don't know if it's possible for us to. Is my phone making crazy noises? Maybe. For us to make a significant change, if it's not, you know what I mean? Like, if we don't really know what happened, we don't know our identity, then how can we change who we want to, who we're becoming? It's like, I just feel like the two are tied together. So history is so important. Tell everyone, Zach, where they can find you on all across all your platforms, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. You can find me on Twitter _Zach Foster. On Instagram, it's Zachary __Foster __. But if you search for my name, Zach Foster, Zachary Foster, Palestine, it'll come up. And just direct everyone to my website, PalestineNexus.com. That's where all my writing is. My newsletter, articles are all there. Plus courses I teach on the history of Palestine and Zionism and anti-Zionism. You can find all that at PalestineNexus.com.
Awesome. And I've been reading some of them and looking at a bunch of them, in preparation for this podcast. There's a lot of great information there. So check it out. Listen, like the name of what did I saw? I saw something, the name of your, a podcast for intellectual self-defense. It's important that we know what happened, or you can't have an argument with. I mean, you're going to have a hard time with the Zionists anyway, because they have a whole different set of data sets that they're going to come at you with. But it's important for you to arm yourself with true history and what has happened when you're having these debates, so that people who are listening, if they're listening or reading the comments and listening to the debate, then they have at least a little bit of what actually happened instead of just the propaganda. So, for everyone who's listening, on YouTube, or I should say listening on Spotify and iTunes, if you enjoy this podcast, let Zach and I know you enjoyed the conversation. Drop us a comment or a review, and 5 stars go a long way. You guys know a lot of my podcasts are not algorithmically friendly, to say the least. And maybe this one is kind of in the middle. Hopefully we'll see. They're exerting a lot of pressure on social medias to suppress content that discusses these things. So I need your help getting this out, sharing this podcast. If you're listening or watching on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And if you want to support me and my work, I also have a Patreon page. My logo, we have some really customizable merch we do with my logo. It's really cool. And it's a bunch of, spiritual, freedom-loving people in a community. So check that out as well. And Zach, it's been a pleasure, brother. I'll be in touch. We'll cut some clips that we can, spread through IG and all our pages, and we'll get the word out about this podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Zach. Take care. Have a great day, man.
Okay. Cheers.
Thank you.